Welcome to Hungry Dads, your guided tour through the delicate and often overwhelming balancing act between food indulgences and social acceptance. And now, as always, here are your hosts, Rod Budget and Hugh Gallen.
Hello and welcome to episode 27 of Hungry Dads. I'm Rod Budget.
I'm Hugh Gallen. Hello, hello.
Hello. And tonight I want to quickly touch on something we talked about last week in episode 26. We focused a lot on a Miracle Whip ad from several years ago. If you haven't checked it out, check out the episode. But basically, it was Miracle Whip trying to come off as super hip and a kind of weird, almost a parody type TV commercial. I promised Mr. Gallen that I would do some research into it, and I've done preliminary research. I don't have too much information yet, but I did find out that the ad came from an ad agency called McGarry Bowen out of Chicago. They have offices all over. This is out of the Chicago office. And this is an agency that kind of has grown quickly over the past 10 years. They're kind of the cool shop in advertising. It seems like every 5 or 10 years there's a really cool shop that all the clients want to go with. And they have this exponential growth and they kind of level off. I haven't found the exact creative people who have done the ad yet, but I did find that there definitely was a big controversy over whether or not it was an intentional parody. So just reading message boards and comments and kind of advertising trade websites, and even to this day I've found some pretty recent ones that it's still kind of a controversy of whether or not this was intentionally tongue-in-cheek or if it was just a stupid ad.
Would you say you were able to determine a prevailing view from people, knowledgeable people in the industry?
It seems like I would say about 2/3 were that it was supposed to be serious, and 1/3 were no, this is tongue-in-cheek. So I don't know. It makes it all the more interesting to me. It really makes me want to get to the bottom of it, which I think the only way to do is to find somebody who worked on it and is willing to reveal. And
then even then, I mean, if it's
they might not want to admit that.
I'm not sure you get an honest answer, because even if I were them and my original intent was to be serious and then it clearly looked like a joke, I'd quickly change my story into that it was a joke in order to save face, or at least blur the lines a little bit. So I'm not sure that the truth will ever come out.
It may be difficult to get a definitive answer, but I am going to keep digging and I will update our listeners from time to time as details emerge.
This kind of investigative reporting would be absolutely fascinating to me, and I want to see this story develop.
I think our listeners deserve an answer, and I will give them as much as I can get.
Hungry Dads!
We've also touched on Nutella the past couple of weeks. Is it Nutella or Nutella?
I think I've said Nutella. That sounds European to me, although it is nut-based and Nutella. Nutella sounds like how an American would say it. Right. Nutella sounds the European.
So Nutella, because we are European here. Anyway, we read some copy off their packaging recently, and Hugh mentioned that they got in trouble for trying to portray themselves as healthier than they are. This doesn't really relate to that directly, but in the news today I read a kind of funny article, and this also is similar to the Lay's Do Us a Flavor that we've touched on, giving consumers control. So in France, Nutella ran a social media campaign where they invited consumers to basically write things on their packaging, make their own Nutella label, which doesn't seem overly compelling to me, but it was a thing. So, as we've mentioned in past episodes talking about Lay's Do Us a Flavor, there are filters that you can't just write anything. You can't write profanity. Nutella doesn't want people portraying them in a negative light. So, people kept getting rejected for what they thought were kind of absurd reasons. So, as it turns out, some hackers went in and actually decoded the list of words that Nutella had put out there that were forbidden. And it was really, really interesting because there were things like Jewish references, things that you might not think of. There were references.
Well, things that neither you or I would think of because we're not, really in the business of stirring up that kind of trouble. But I suppose when you're Nutella or Lay's, you got to have someone on your team who can think of the most evil, awful things in the world so you can block them. I'd be terrible at that. I'm way too naive. I wouldn't be able to think across the breadth of racism and bigotry and evil it takes to block out these words.
And the article even touched on how extensive the list was and how well thought out it was. But there were things in there also like palm oil and orangutans, which I didn't realize. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, but apparently Nutella has come under fire for getting their palm oil in orangutan habitats and wiping them out, and those were in the list, so now that's out there. As these things can tend to snowball on themselves, someone has already made a list of synonyms or suggested words to use to get around their filters. So, long story short, Nutella has already taken down the contest, and they're obviously upset, but they're kind of being fun about it and saying, good job, people, but we're not going to do it anymore. And my question to you, Hugh Gallen, being the marketing expert you are, is this bad for Nutella? Is this good press? They're in the press. Is it indifferent? What do you think?
Boy, I think in the end, I think it's bad for them. I will just take myself as the solo case study. I never thought much about Nutella one way or the other. Now I have some inkling that they kill orangutans maybe, and that isn't exactly an attractive thought. I have the thought that even though it's for self-preservation, there's someone on their payroll who is brainstorming various anti-Semitic words in order to avoid them. Just having that list of words it just associates it. So in the end, I think it's not good actually, which is a shame because I can logically sit back and say this was an innocent promotion that probably should have been a lot of fun. But the internet's a dangerous, scary place. And it's a dangerous, scary new world to be promoting anything.
Nutella is no longer the innocent hazelnut spread that I once thought it was. That's the bottom line. Just one last thing to leave on because I thought it was funny. I will read one of the synonyms that someone came up with for getting around the French word for doo-doo, but the profane version. They came up with boudin fécal, which means fecal sausage.
Boudin fécal.
Hungry Dads.
So Hugh, in episode 15, you gave a wonderful analysis of food fusions. And you also touched on one of the most unusual fusions and most hated out there, and that being the fusion of toothpaste and orange juice. Let's just take a quick listen back at that conversation.
I have one honorable mention here that I wanted to mention, and it's something that you have to have experienced. Drinking orange juice after you've brushed your teeth. Have you ever been unfortunate enough to do that?
Yes, and
It is a uniquely horrible flavor.
it's perhaps the worst flavor you could imagine. There's some sort of chemical reaction going on there. I don't know what it is, but also Mountain Dew, which probably isn't a very flattering statement. It was college. It was perhaps college or high school. Not recently. At least I was brushing my teeth, you know?
So as you heard, I've had a problem with this. I took it a step further with the Mountain Dew. And really, this has frankly always been a problem for me. I feel like more than the average adult. I don't know if I don't thoroughly rinse, but I've really focused on my rinsing lately. And, I'll rinse for a minute or two with just water and spitting. And then, not even immediately, but 20 minutes later, I'll go to eat something or drink something, and I can still have that toothpaste chemical reaction, which, as we touched on, is just terrible. Sometimes I'm in a rush, so maybe I don't thoroughly rinse. Sometimes maybe I drink orange juice too soon afterwards, but I don't know, Hugh. Am I the only one out there with this rinsing problem?
Yeah, no, I think that I don't know if you can rinse that out. My general perspective is I just know that first drink I'm just going to have to power through that flavor. And then in my experience, the second drink isn't so bad. So I've brushed my teeth. I've done a thorough job. I've rinsed as good as I can. And like you said, 20, 30, maybe even more minutes later, I'm ready to have that orange juice or that Mountain Dew or whatever it might be. And I just kind of, hopefully if I'm paying attention, I know that first drink's going to taste pretty crummy. And then after that, it washes away, it undoes my toothbrushing, and I can enjoy whatever it is that's going to rot my teeth.
Well, with that as background, we know here at Hungry Dads that we're into scientific research, getting in the laboratory when possible, when needed, and I feel like this is a case where I need to get in the laboratory and brush my teeth live on air, and then taste various items and report back. I didn't really think, honestly, before you just made that point of tasting twice, that the first taste is bad and the second is better. But I think now I will take 2 drinks of each item after I brush. I'm going to be thorough as possible. It's going to be like a wine tasting. I'm going to brush my teeth. I'm going to drink the beverage. I will report. I'll take another drink and report. Cleanse my palate, spit out in my spit cup I have here, move on to the next beverage.
It's quite a setup I see you have in front of you. And this is actually one of the occasions I know we're in the medium of podcasting where it's all audio. But watching you sit at your computer, brushing your teeth, spitting, swigging drinks, this is going to be a visual that I hope our listeners can pay attention to and get in their head to join us at the theater of the mind as this happens.
This is certainly a laboratory setup here. We have a lot of beverages. I will quickly run them down. I have 3 categories of beverages. I'll explain that. I have breakfast beverages, which I think is pretty obvious. You're usually brushing your teeth in the morning, and these are kind of the key beverages. I have a Tropicana Pure Premium, not from concentrate orange juice. This is good orange juice that I would normally drink. I don't like concentrated orange juice, so I'm trying to be fair and not skew the results. I have a drink of 2% milk, white milk, and then I have chocolate milk for the breakfast items. Then I have 2 sodas because I feel like I could have soda at any time, as I've mentioned, whether it be morning.
I frankly think you could put these in the breakfast category as well, but continue on.
I'm trying to bring some respectability to the podcast here. I will brush my teeth at work from time to time and then go to have some lunch with soda, perhaps. I have Mountain Dew because I have experience with that, but I want to make sure that my memory is correct. I haven't done it in a long time. And then I got Dr. Pepper because I wanted a dark cola to compare it to. I don't care for Coke or Pepsi that much, but I like Dr. Pepper. And my third and final category is alcohol because I feel a lot of times at social functions, especially work events, people brush their teeth beforehand and they're going to have a few cocktails and drinks. I have a Miller Lite. And I have a Cabernet Sauvignon, a red wine. Wow. I like the red wines. This is a robust wine. I feel like it'll give us the most interesting result. And finally, last but not least, I will sip some tequila and see what that does. I thought it would be interesting with such a violent flavor to see if it just cuts right through the toothpaste. Maybe tequila is what you need to kill the toothpaste flavor. I don't know.
You got a lot of brushing to do there. Are you sure you're prepared with sufficient toothpaste, water, spit cups?
Thank you. That brings me to my next point. The toothpaste I will use is my go-to toothpaste. I didn't get special toothpaste. It's Crest Pro Health. I feel like it's a neutral toothpaste. It's not like a crazy Aquafresh, or it's not like super bland. So I feel like this is a middle-of-the-line toothpaste that will give us fair results in this controlled experiment. All right, so I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to start with orange juice because I think that's kind of the baseline, one that people are familiar with, and I think it'll give us a good baseline to test off of. So I'm going to apply some toothpaste to my brush here and try not to drip too much water on the desk. Oof. Got a good coating, I think. I went with the tongue. That's key. So here goes the orange juice. Taste 1. It's bad. It's expected. Actually, not as bad as I remember, but it's bad. Taste 2. Taste 2 is certainly better. That validates your hypothesis. But yeah, it's bad. It's not pleasant. It's an acidic kind of reaction, which brings me to my overall hypothesis. I think that the more acidic drinks will have the more violent reactions, and the more basic drinks, not basic, simple, but less acidity, alkaline drinks, will perhaps even squelch the toothpaste taste, which leads me to milk. That leads right in. This is a very basic drink.
As you get into this next round of brushing, I'll share that some people are very turned off by the sound of brushing, actually. I know Mrs. Gallen, actually, it makes her skin crawl. So,
well, that's part of the enjoyment, I think. How about spitting of toothpaste?
The spitting is not doing anything for me, so go ahead. This one is...
We are bringing a visual and an audio medium. I think this is doing a service. I need to get the milk before I invalidate the experiment. Here we go. Oh, the milk's bad. That's bad.
Wow, fascinating.
It tastes sour. It tastes like kind of sour milk. Maybe the milk's just sour. I don't think it is, though. No, the milk smells normally. I'll do the second drink. Oh, slightly better. But milk's worse than orange juice, I think, which is surprising to me. It's at least on par. I was expecting just to taste milk, and it was almost a sour milk taste. Next up will be chocolate milk, which I think is interesting because chocolate milk is inherently more tasty than regular milk.
It's delicious.
With the sugar. It's one of the most delicious things you can have, and I'm hoping it doesn't get completely ruined.
Now, maybe because chocolate mint is a flavor that works, so part of me might think that, I don't know, maybe it would have a pleasurable taste.
This is a Borden Dutch chocolate milk. It looks high quality. Here we go. Chocolate milk's still pretty good.
Okay.
It cuts through. You can certainly still taste the toothpaste, but you definitely get the chocolatey goodness more.
Does the enjoyment of the chocolate milk, is it significantly diminished, or is it powerful enough where you still enjoyed your drinks?
If the entire bottle tasted like it does with Taste 1, I would still drink the entire bottle.
Got it. So it was pleasurable.
It was quite pleasurable still. It's interesting. It masked the toothpaste, whereas the white milk kind of just blew up. I think there are chemical reactions going on, but I don't know what. My hypothesis has already been proven null.
Shattered.
Yes.
Well, that's why we're here in the laboratory, the Hungry Dad's laboratory.
But I will press on because I'm curious. I will now go to the sodas, and I will start with Mountain Dew because I want to validate that it tastes really bad.
Now, give yourself a good coating. As this experiment continues, I think you could get acclimated, and I don't want that to happen. So really make sure that we're not going to sit here while you. What are you supposed to do? Sing "Happy Birthday" twice, or that's washing your hands. But whatever amount of time you're supposed to brush, I'm not saying you go that long, but give it a good solid brushing here.
I should also mention that I am thoroughly rinsing my brush and cleansing my palate between each taste test.
There you go.
I'm going to make Hugh Gallen vomit tonight. That's my goal.
We're going to have to do some serious editing decisions as to whether to keep or lose those sounds, because they really do add some theater of the mind. But I'm not sure it's anything our listeners
I definitely have a very
hear.
good coat this time. I really focused on the tongue. Oh, I can barely get it down. It's immediate, it's like the orange juice times 3.
Oh, wow.
It's terrible. It's the carbonation, I think, that enhances the yuckiness.
So now I would start to say, okay, so there's sugar. There's a sugar reaction.
Yes, that's a good
But then you
point.
have the chocolate milk, which has sugar in it, presumably more sugar than the regular milk.
Right.
So this chocolate milk is really the anomaly in the.
Thus far, it is. So the Mountain Dew was quite horrid. I don't know if that's worse than the milk. I think it's similar to milk. It's a different taste, but equally bad. Okay, another good coating. Opening the Dr. Pepper. These are unopened bottles. I wanted it to be a fair test. Here we go, Dr. Pepper. I'm really interested in this one. Mm-hmm. It's pretty bad. Not as bad as the Mountain Dew, but bad. Taste 2 is actually not too bad.
Because the mouth has a certain sensitivity when it's minty, and maybe the carbonation bounces off that in some way.
Yeah, it's strange. It's a good point, because I didn't notice this with Mountain Dew, but with the Dr. Pepper, it seemed almost not uncarbonated, but it didn't have enough carbonation to it. And it's a brand new bottle, as you heard. It had plenty of carbonation. There might be some reaction where the carbonation is reflected by the toothpaste, perhaps. The atoms just bounce right off the toothpaste atoms. Any soda is not going to be pleasant, even after a couple of drinks.
And now we're moving into the booze?
We are moving into the booze. I'll start with the beer, and then I will move on to red wine and finish with tequila.
Oof.
Here we go with the beer. I'm not picturing this being good. It's bad. It's similar to the soda phenomenon. It tastes almost skunky or flat. Less carbonated than a beer should be. I'll take a second taste.
Is it fizzing up in your mouth more than normal?
It might
or
be,
anything like that?
now that you mention it. It's like maybe a lot of carbonation rushes to the roof of my mouth immediately. So I think there's something going on. You've hit on something where the carbonation is not integrated into the taste. So these carbonated drinks get a little bit decarbonated.
Yeah, is it foaming? I mean, I feel like it foams up quickly in your mouth, reacting with the mint, and then the drink becomes
right. I think maybe what's happening is the carbonation might be bonding with the toothpaste, and then when you swallow, it's kind of carbonated toothpaste, and then the drink isn't as carbonated. Like the flavor of the drink is left without carbonation.
Right. It sucks that flavor right out at the tip of your tongue rather than the back of your throat.
We have 2 non-carbonated beverages left, so this will be interesting. Brushing again. Next up is the red wine. This is a robust Cabernet Sauvignon. Here we go. This is not going to be good. Actually, the wine's not nearly as bad as the carbonated things. So I think we may have hit on something. It's not great. Okay. I'd say it's in second place behind the chocolate milk. So I will brush one last time, and then I will sip some tequila, which I'm not one to do tequila shots.
I toothbrush, no toothbrush. Tequila turns my nose up every time. So
I'll enjoy sipping on a nicer tequila, which this is not super nice, but I can sip on it without invalidating the experiment. Here we go. I'm curious. I'm very curious about this one to see if it just cuts right through or something explodes. It pretty much cuts right through the toothpaste. Yeah.
It tastes like
it's
tequila.
Almost a sensation of you can feel it kind of, if this makes any sense, creating a path through the toothpaste and just kind of trickling on top of it right down your throat. It goes down pretty quickly and smoothly if it's decent. And that's kind of what it's doing with the toothpaste. It's just cutting right through it.
Interesting. All right. So the lesson learned is after you brush your teeth, reach for either the chocolate milk or the tequila. I'd like to pick up in a next chapter where we left off in episode 3. We talked in depth about sandwiches in episode 3, and we asked the question, what is a sandwich? And we used some law and some logic to talk about what a sandwich is. But what we didn't do was talk about what constitutes a good sandwich. And to mention what we talked about in episode 3, we posed questions like, what constitutes a sandwich? Is it the 2 pieces of bread? And is it a wrap? Is it a burrito? What does the law say? Well, here tonight, when we're talking about sandwiches, I want to talk about 2 pieces of bread and the stuff in between them. And I want to share 5 principles of sandwich assembly, 5 principles of good sandwich assembly. And I have created little rhymes to help our listeners remember these 5 important principles of sandwich assembly. And maybe I'll just share the 5 principles up front, and then we'll go through them one by one. So first principle of good sandwich assembly is baguettes and the like can take a hike.
Yes.
Principle number 2 states it's okay to delete some meat before you eat. Principle number 3, always make a friction prediction.
I have no idea what that means.
You will soon learn. Principle number 4, relax and cheese with ease. And principle number 5, be the boss of your sauce. So let's circle back to principle number 1, and you seem to react immediately to that, and you knew exactly what I meant, which is baguettes and the like can take a hike. These hard, crusty breads, we talked about this significantly in episode 12, Angry Dads, where you brought up the fact that certain breads would cut your mouth. Look, French bread, baguettes, they're a fine bread. There's nothing wrong with them, but not for a sandwich. A good sandwich can have crusty bread, but not hard-shelled bread. You're going to cut your mouth. You end up having structural integrity problems trying to take a bite. These breads, baguettes, and such are not made for a sandwich.
I'm not proud to admit that I have bled on more than one occasion from eating a sandwich.
It's just not a sandwich bread. Baguettes can be wonderful sliced up with olive oil or with butter, soup and such, but not on a sandwich. There are too many other excellent breads out there that you can use to make a good sandwich. And I'm not eliminating all crusty breads from the equation. There are some breads that have an outer crust and then an inner softness that can work without cutting you. But if it's hard enough where if you tap on it, you get a kind of a hollow drum sound.
Yes, everybody knows the hollow thump, yeah.
That's not a bread for your sandwich. That's a bread for your soup or a bread for your, pre-dinner bread and butter.
If you can use it as a wiffle ball bat, it's probably not a good sandwich bread. That's always been my test.
That's a very solid test. Since we're talking about bread, I do just want to make an alert on the opposite side, which is to say if you have a bread that's too soft and too thin, you could have a soak-through situation with either your condiments or your tomato. So that's not to say soft bread is the universal solution either.
Yeah, the soak through happens with me at least on if you're trying to get a little too aggressive with plain white bread, kind of your Wonder Bread type, but you want to pile it high. that type of bread is just not built to sustain that kind of 21st century pilot high attitude.
And that's where you need to get strategic with your placement of items. Second principle of good sandwich assembly was it's okay to delete some meat before you eat. And what I'm talking about here are these deli-style sandwiches, either the fancy ones that you get from the fancy delis, and this is really, I experience this a lot in New York, so I don't know if you see this everywhere, but there's this phenomenon to have a sandwich, a deli-style sandwich, where the meat is literally like 5 or 6 inches thick, or even in a standard deli, they give you a lot of meat. I am pleased to have all that meat in my sandwich, but at a certain point it ceases being a sandwich and it becomes a pastrami platter with a couple pieces of bread. So if you really want a good sandwich, in the form of a good sandwich, you got to get some of that meat out there. You want to be able to taste your bread. You want to be able to taste your vegetables, your condiments. And if all you're tasting is meat, again, a big plate of pastrami can be delicious, but it's not a sandwich. So if you're looking to make a good sandwich, it's okay to delete some meat before you eat. In episode 4, we talked about the Meat Mountain sandwich from Arby's. We didn't exactly give it a great review from what we saw, but in the end, I think you'd have to question its validity as a sandwich in the first place. When it's that much meat, it's essentially a pile of meat. It's not a sandwich. A sandwich has to have a good distribution of flavors between the bread, your cheese, your vegetables, and your meat.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Some people will probably disagree, but just from a practical standpoint, they're almost impossible to eat. You can't unhinge your jaw like a python and get the entire sandwich in your mouth. And there's nothing wrong with taking some meat off and eating the sandwich, and then, hey, you got some leftover meat. It still tastes delicious. Just eat the meat.
I'm not bemoaning the fact that you're given a lot of meat. Given the choice, I'd rather have extra meat than not enough. I'm just saying, for the quality of the sandwich, it's okay to take some off. The third principle of good sandwich assembly was always make a friction prediction. And what I'm talking about here is how you're going to structure your sandwich, what your layers are going to be, and mostly I'm talking about vegetables here. You've got vegetables that have a high viscosity. They're slippery, they're slick, and they are going to compromise your sandwich as you bite into it, as you squeeze it, if you don't place things properly. Sandwiches is one of the few places I actually like vegetables, but the placement of that vegetable, bad placement, can ruin your sandwich. If you have that hard bread, you have a good chance of your vegetable just creating a slippery slope environment up against maybe your slippery meats, especially like a cured meat or bologna. That tomato is going to slide right up against it. So you want to be assessing your sandwich before you make it, or if you're buying it before you take a bite. Where is that tomato? Is it right up against your meat? Maybe you want to move it up against the bread, buffered with a piece of lettuce in between, and maybe a piece of cheese in between, so that you are not having two slippery components right up next to each other.
Yeah, that's great expert advice. That's detailed advice. I think the tomato is probably the biggest problem. Like you said, if you have a tomato up against a salted cured meat, that's just a lot of slick stuff, and you could shoot a tomato right out of a sandwich. I've seen it happen. Also, pickles. I don't eat them on sandwiches that much, but occasionally a certain type of sandwich, I'll have some bread and butter type pickles. Those are also very slick and will just shoot right out.
The fourth principle of good sandwich assembly: relax and cheese with ease. And what I mean to say by this is, which I already mentioned, cheese is kind of your utility player. It's not a high-risk component to your sandwich, and it actually really is your friend when you're constructing the flavor of your sandwich and the structural integrity of your sandwich. It's usually a pretty sticky component that you can put in between slippery things. I think cheese tends to have a good flavor, but mild enough where you're not at risk of overdoing it or underdoing it with your cheese. A little bit of cheese, a lot of cheese, you almost can't go wrong with your cheese. Just like with meat, you don't want 2 inches of cheese, but 1 slice, 2 slices, 3 slices, heck, 4 slices of cheese probably is going to be just fine in your sandwich. So of all the warnings I'm distributing in this good sandwich assembly, what I want to say is cheese is really your friend. Cheese is your ally, your utility player. It can go anywhere, and really it's a flavor-safe component to your sandwich.
Yeah, have some fun with the cheese. You got to concentrate on all this other stuff, but the cheese it's there for fun.
Be at ease with your cheese.
That's good.
The fifth and final principle of sandwich assembly is to be the boss of your sauce. And here I'm talking about condiments. Mayo, mustard, ketchup, whatever it is. You don't want to overdo it. You can undo the meat. You can take the meat out. You can take some cheese out. You can remove your vegetables. But a lot of times you can't undo the sauce. Also, if you're putting too much sauce, condiments, mayo in there, there's a good chance even if you like that much flavor, it's all just going to squish out anyway. So my advice is be in control of it, be the boss of your sauce, put some on your sandwich, but don't put too much on. And then if you like a lot of that condiment, keep some on the side. You can dip, you can use a knife to kind of spread it on each bite, but if you like a lot of it, you run the risk of overdoing it when you first put it on. And then even if you do, it's just going to squish out the sides. So control your sauce. This rule also extends to coleslaw, in my opinion. While not technically a sauce, you can put a little bit on there, but if you overdo it, you're going to end up having a very sloppy sandwich. So in order to keep control, put a little bit on the sandwich, then keep some on the side. You can kind of fork it onto each bite, have a real good control of your coleslaw. Be the boss of your sauce and of your coleslaw.
I'm making a bit of a mess on the desk here for those Hungry Dads. Visit our website at hungrydads.com. Follow us on Twitter at hungry_dads. This has been a Hungry Dads production.